I'm Zoe delahunty-light, and this is the story of Mother Gooseberry. Just a quick heads up, my research has been inferred from the Outlast Trials data mine and its letters and dialogue lines, and if you love lore as much as I do, consider subscribing to Eurogamer, liking this video and sharing it, as I always need more people to enable my hunger for lore. Anyway, we need to start with Phyllis. We know Mother Gooseberry as a disturbed killer with a drill-mouthed hand puppet, but she wasn't always like this. Before Mother Gooseberry came Phyllis. Her surname may have been FUTTERMAN, later to be the name of her goose puppet, but I can't really know that for sure. What I do know for sure is that Phyllis's childhood was hellish. As a child, Phyllis appears to have been raised by her single father, as I see no mention of her mother in her voice lines. That's not saying she doesn't exist, though I do find it strange that there's zero mention of her, despite Phyllis's deep psychological trauma linked to her father. Her father was overbearing and verbally abusive, insulting Phyllis's weight, openly admitting he regrets her birth and should have sent her to an orphanage, and making her prepare screwdrivers for him or rub his feet. I know those kinds of details for a fact, as it's one of the voice lines Dr. FUTTERMAN barks at Mother Gooseberry when she's stalking her halls in the Outlast Trials. He may have been a dentist, as Dr. FUTTERMAN shows a propensity for dental hygiene that's just expert enough to show that Phyllis might have internalised her father's obsession with dentistry. Throughout her childhood and adolescence, Phyllis did her best to stand up to him, but she could never be quite free of her father. Mother Gooseberry was a persona invented by Phyllis when she became a presenter on a children's show. Like other shows in the 50s made for children, The Outlast Trials takes place in 1959, with Project Lathe occurring in 1954, her programme was heavy with moral and physical lessons, ranging from hygiene to the importance of behaving and listening to your elders. I think Phyllis was drawn to working closely with children in an attempt to fix her own fractured childhood. As Mother Gooseberry, she projected an idealised maternal role model, gentle and kind, forgetting for a moment her own upbringing for the benefits of the children on her show and on the other side of the screen. Mother Gooseberry was separated from her father while she pursued her TV career, but his grip was too strong to leave her completely. Her puppet goose, Dr. FUTTERMAN, would grow into her father's twisted mirror image. Phyllis would never be able to escape him. His voice lines in the Outlast Trials has her directly calling Dr. FUTTERMAN Daddy, so it's clear that the puppet and her father are, by then to her, one and the same. He even has horribly real dentures in by the time we meet him, and who knows, maybe those dentures once even belonged to Mother Gooseberry's father. Dr. FUTTERMAN had a significant role on Mother Gooseberry's show. He even had his own jingle that went, "Mother's friend FUTTERMAN, silly goose, wiggled out the roost, now he's on the loose." I don't know how the tune goes, but that's how I'm interpreting it. He was a mischievous character, escaping from his roost to go and play with the children and encourage them to brush their teeth. Voice lines from the Outlast Trials has Dr. FUTTERMAN screaming, "I will teach you about dental hygiene. I will teach you about dental hygiene. And if you don't take care of your teeth, then I will." Having a secondary character to teach children lessons is something you can see in kids' shows today. And for Mother Gooseberry, the importance of taking care of your teeth was Dr. FUTTERMAN's role to play, with Mother Gooseberry taking on the more maternal and loving obedience lessons. It's possible she also compartmentalised dental hygiene as being Dr. FUTTERMAN's job, so she didn't have to relive the childhood trauma she experienced under the thumb of her father, the dentist. As Mother Gooseberry's sidekick, he seems to have sometimes played the role of the enforcer as well, as voice lines have Mother Gooseberry saying, "Come on, Dr. FUTTERMAN, let's teach them some manners," and, "Oh, I'm afraid you've upset Dr. FUTTERMAN." With her show warning against misbehaving, teaching manners and obedience, it seems to me that Mother Gooseberry was the good cop and Dr. Futterman was the bad cop. Disobey Mother Gooseberry and you get Dr. Futterman. Within the walls of Project Lathe, this dichotomy would spiral out of control. So popular was Phyllis and her Mother Gooseberry show that she developed what Dr. Easterman called a cult of personality. She was famous in her day, known by children all around America, but one day that all changed. I don't know when, I don't know why, and I don't know how, but Phyllis experienced a dreadful accident. Something destroyed her face, lips, nose, and scalp, eradicating her hair follicles along the top of her head, giving her a bald patch and rendering her unrecognisable to those who knew Phyllis as Mother Gooseberry. To repair her appearance, Phyllis underwent surgery and had a facial prosthetic installed. But it wasn't enough. In the narrow-minded 50s, it just wasn't allowed for someone with facial prosthetics or bodily differences to appear on television, and Phyllis was abandoned by her show. No longer could she be Mother Gooseberry, playing with children, telling them stories and teaching them right from wrong, briefly providing them respite from the grim outer world with her idealised world of joy and maternal care. This was too much for Phyllis to take. And so, Phyllis died, and Mother Gooseberry was born. Even though her TV show didn't want her, you know who did? Dr. Easterman. He is the one who came up with the idea for Project Lathe, with the Outlast Trials being the second, reworked version of the project, named Lathe 2. Easterman worked closely in some respects with Wernicke, the creator of the Mount Massive Asylum from the first Outlast game, but that's a story for another video. Dr. Easterman is the one who scouted Mother Gooseberry after her accident and brought her into Project Lathe. He'd end up spending quite a bit of time with her, which was not the wisest decision. Project Lathe was Easterman's brainchild. Its ultimate aim was to brainwash its agents into being comfortable with breaking all taboos, murder included, so they could have sleeper agents at their disposal across the United States. How to brainwash people, though? Simple. Put them through an experience where to survive, they have to break these taboos, mentally breaking these people down into nothing, so Project Lathe can build them back up into whatever they want them to be. This first cohort of people would become known as the experimental population, and were taken from the Mount Massive Asylum from the first Outlast game. I'll go into that in more detail in an upcoming video. Mother Gooseberry was one of the prime assets of Project Lathe. Prime assets had their own fiefdoms in Project Lathe, and in these fiefdoms is where the taboos would be burned away through a combination of mental assault, violence, and hero worship. For someone as charismatic and with their own cult of personality like Mother Gooseberry, she would be the anvil against which the agents could be broken down and moulded right back up, with their allegiance belonging to their Mother Gooseberry. Easterman would later consider his decision to mix with the prime assets a mistake. He spent enough time with Mother Gooseberry for her to unconsciously see him as a proxy to her father, which he observed in his own letters. While I don't know the details of how she was admitted to Project Lathe, I would assume her fragile mental state was taken advantage of after her accident, and then was exacerbated to make her a fitting prime asset, who was made to believe she was in her idyllic, child-oriented world once again. Project Lathe went completely wrong. Mother Gooseberry breaks free and goes on a killing spree with the other prime assets and her own experimental population, who by now were completely under her control thanks to Project Lathe. The experimental population had begun to see Mother Gooseberry as their leader, and as it had kind of been successful and all those taboos had been broken, they joined her on her massacre, following Mother Gooseberry as she led the way. You can tell something went seriously wrong here, because their experimental population weren't the only people who were affected. People who, in effect, were cannon fodder for Easterman's experiments, and thus it wouldn't have been remarkable had they died. In February 1959, security staff, research staff, and maintenance staff, as well as 5 visitors, were massacred. They obviously tried to suppress the incident, as the next largest cohort of people to die, after the experimental population, were the security staff, indicating that they were called in to try and restore order, and many of them fell victim to Mother Gooseberry and her devoted experimental population in the process. Too much control was given to the prime assets in Project Lathe. Easterman himself says, "We cannot control the prime assets, and therefore we cannot control the experimental population." This model would be overhauled for Project Lathe 2, which we know as the Outlast Trials. Of Project Lathe 2, Easterman explains that it's going to be really similar to Project Lathe, down to the areas the new test subjects, named reagents, would be thrown into. "Gooseberry will believe she's in her make-believe world of childhood joy," Easterman writes. "Her belief, her control over the experimental population, creates a furnace of violent taboo within which we can burn away the reagents' personalities." Easterman summarises Mother Gooseberry thus: "The prime asset of the exercise is storyteller, mother, and puppeteer." Following the events of Project Lathe, Mother Gooseberry's bond with Dr. Futterman has been taken to a new level. Mother Gooseberry and Dr. Futterman are now one and the same, sharing the same senses, with Dr. Futterman having more self-awareness than Mother Gooseberry. He knows he's a puppet. "Did you hear that, Phyllis? Even I heard that, and I don't even have fucking earses," he can be heard to say. And Mother Gooseberry even uses Dr. Futterman to see, with the goose commanding Gooseberry to hold him up in a voice line which goes, "Holds me up, they gotta be around here somewhere." While I don't think she can literally see through his eyes or hear through his ears, it's apparent that Phyllis doesn't exist anymore. Instead, her sense of self has been tangled up and then spat back out in the identity of Mother Gooseberry and Dr. Futterman, 2 entities who, by now, cannot be separated from one another. Conflict still arises between the two, though. Mother Gooseberry asks Dr. Futterman to call her Mother Gooseberry in front of the children, otherwise known as the reagents, and not by Phyllis, yet she still addresses him as Daddy. A ghostly callback to her former life as Phyllis, it implies her father might have visited the set of her show, gleefully humiliating her in front of children. Even off-air, she felt the need to keep up the illusion of being a motherly, infallible figure. Despite having her own fiefdom under Project Lathe 2, Mother Gooseberry is still undermined by Dr. Futterman. She can't escape him. By now, he is part of her. During Project Lathe 2, Mother Gooseberry sees her experimental population, hereafter called X-Pop, the same shorthand that Easterman uses, and the new cohort of reagents as children. Dr. Futterman is still her enforcer, painting herself as sympathetic to the children's plight, while putting distance between herself and Dr. Futterman's punishment. She says, "I'm sure they didn't mean it. They're good children." But also, "That's a good child. Daddy, would you like to operate?" She wants them to follow Mother's advice, listens to the voices on the radio and doesn't listen to Mother, fearing them growing up. Abandonment issues and thirst for control is disguised as unconditional maternal love. Mother Gooseberry just can't cope with children rejecting her. Her abandonment issues come out to play as she howls, "You're too delicate! You're too precious! You can't go!" At the moment, that's where Mother Gooseberry's story ends. When the game comes out, I'll do an updated version with what else I found out about her, but until then, I hope you liked the video, and if you enjoy all things video game lore-shaped, then consider subscribing to Eurogamer, as we have a new video game video out almost every single day, and I cover loads more video game lore in a playlist on the Eurogamer channel. What do you think of Mother Gooseberry or the Outlast Trials so far? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, thanks very much, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Eurogamer, as we have a new video out almost every single day. Now, I'm going to go and research Project Lathe just a little bit more, so I'll see you lot next time.